everybody, and welcome back to Lindsey's Little Library. So we're here today because it is officially the end of the year. I'm literally filming this on December 31st. It's been a year. So I thought I would take a moment and look back at my reading year and what I've read, what I liked, what I didn't like, and share with you 10 of my favorite books of the year. So I ended up reading 101 books, and I'm currently in the beginning of another one, which there's no way I'm finishing that before midnight. So 101 books, it's not all that bad. Half of them were physical books, half were ebook, or a quarter were ebooks, a quarter were audiobooks. I did get a chunk of them from my shelves, even though it doesn't really look like it. But it did pretty good. I had overall, I think my average rating is just under a 4-star. So I tend to be pretty generous with my stars still, even though I've kind of rolled that back a little bit. But overall, it was a really great year. I mean, any year that I can read any amount of books is a good year to me. And yes, 101 is it's a crazy amount. But I did the math as far as pages go, and it was about 50 pages a day. And I listened, what did that come out to? I listened to about a half an hour a day. So if you think about it that way, it wasn't too bad. But here's my 10 books that I have not only given 5 stars for the year, but are definitely ones that have stuck through me the entire year. So they're probably going to be repeats if you've been around here before. And I have, I think, 7 of them still in physical form, and the rest were either listened to or on my Kindle. So no particular order. We'll just kind of pick a book from the pile and pick a book off of my little list here, and we'll kind of go through it. Don't make me pick a favorite. It's like picking a favorite child. I can't do it. And it would probably change on a daily basis. So anyways, we're going to start off strong with one of my favorite authors of all time. This is Jodi Picoult, her newest book, By Any Other Name. Again, I think it helps when I go see authors, because I feel like I get a better understanding for the book, and I get like that kind of behind the scenes where they came up with the idea and the story, and I hear the passion that they have for the story. And that was in no short supply when I saw her earlier this year with my best friend. We've seen her like 10 or 11 times. So this one definitely, the main kind of theme in this one is how women have different expectations and different, they're looked at very differently and not necessarily given the credit where credit is due at all times. This is a dual timeline, so we have a historical component to this one as well as current day. It revolves around the theater and very big Shakespeare themes throughout the book. The idea is that Shakespeare was not the one that wrote all of his plays, and that we actually have Amelia Bassano, who was the true kind of brains behind a lot of Shakespeare's most famous plays. And then we have a current day, again set in the theaters, a woman putting a man's name on her work to hopefully get it noticed. Really, really well done. Lots of tabs in here. I do understand this isn't for everyone, and maybe this isn't going to be a 5-star book for everyone, but for me, I can't stop thinking about this book, and it will always stick with me, just like Jodi tends to do for me. So highly recommend this one if that subject appeals to you. I've talked to other people some people liked the more current timeline better. Some people liked the past timeline better. There's kind of a mixed bag, but for me, it was chef's kiss. It was fantastic. Ooh, don't fall. All right, next one I want to talk about is probably the one book that I read most recently. This was The Lobotomist's Wife, and I can't think of the name, Samantha something. It's going to be here. But this follows Ruth, and Ruth is a historical fiction again, early 1900s, 1950s, 1940s, something like that. She is the I want to say not administrative assistant, but like the number 2 in charge at a mental hospital. Again, weren't really called that at that time, but that's what we'll call them today. So she's number 2 in charge. She cares very, very much for her patients, and she understands that they're going through some really trying things and wholeheartedly believes that she can help them. Then enter this charming man whom she very quickly falls in love with, and he also has the same passion for helping out these patients. his passion is driven by some research he's been doing and by another doctor that he met who is performing lobotomies. He comes up with the frontal lobe lobotomy or the ice pick lobotomy, if you're familiar with history. And he kind of takes it from there using the hospital that Ruth is kind of running as his stepping off point. Now, if you know history at all, the frontal lobotomy, not great. At the time, it was kind of looked at as this like magic cure-all fix for people who were suffering from some not so great mental issues at the time. And it really hits Ruth hard because she wants to have this answer for these patients, yet she starts to kind of see the writing on the wall. And it's her husband. So we go from there. It was really fantastic. I listened to it. I gave it 5 stars. I couldn't think of one thing that would make this book better. I thought it was so great and really underrated. So pick that one up if you have the opportunity to. All right, next book in the stack. We're going to just kind of mix up all the genres as we go through this one. This one is a mystery thriller suspenseful book, Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulek. We'll go with that. This book needs to be read in print because part of the book are these pictures that are throughout the book and throughout the story. So this one follows Mallory Quinn. She's fresh out of rehab. She definitely had a little bit of a setback with some addiction issues in her life, but she's ready to start anew. And she ends up getting this nanny job. She's kind of been given this one and only chance to kind of make it on her own. And she's watching this little boy for Ted and Carolyn Maxwell. Their 5-year-old son, Teddy. She immediately loves this new job. She actually lives on property in a little guest house in the back, which the way Jason wrote, I could very clearly see this whole setup and this whole thing. And I really wanted to live in this little guest house. It sounds so adorable. But quickly, not soon after she started, she starts to have some questions about, is Teddy being influenced or visited by some sort of paranormal spirit? Because his pictures go from this typical 5-year-old pictures, because he loves to draw, to that, and they get progressively more disturbing. And so Mallory starts looking into kind of maybe what is going on here, what is happening, is it the house, is it what's going on, and uncovers some crazy stuff. So this one I could not put down. It was crazy from the start to the finish. Loved every moment of it. Definitely suggest this one. The next book I want to talk about is another historical fiction for us. This is called When the World Fell Silent by Donna Jones Atwood. This one, I was so graciously gifted this by Donna and cannot stop talking about this book. This takes place in Canada, as she's a Canadian author, so highly recommend if you need to add that to your list, check out her books. But this one takes place in Halifax, and it takes place in the 1940s during World War II. And at that time, Halifax was a really busy port at the moment. We are following our main character who is currently living there. She's working at the hospital there. And during this time, there is an accident, an explosion at the port that absolutely decimates Halifax. And many people pass away from it. So many are injured, and a number of families are kind of torn apart, and a number of people are missing. So our main character is a nurse, and she's working at the hospital. And let me just tell you, Donna knows how to write these scenes of when she is working post-explosion at the hospital. Oh my gosh. I remember messaging her and be like, did you seriously just do this? She was like, yep, I did. But it was fantastic. It's so much about family and love and survival. It was wonderful, and it was about an event I did not know much about. So if you're looking for historical fiction to teach you a little bit of something along the way, Donna did her research. I highly suggest that one as well. We'll stick with our historical fictions, and we're going to go now to the time of basically the Titanic. We have the Second Mrs Aster by Shanna Abe, I think. I don't know. This one follows Madeline. She's 17 and tends to kind of attracts the attention of John Jacob Astor, who is a high society, very wealthy man who was married before And I can't remember what happened to his first wife. Oh, they did get a divorce. I was gonna say it felt scandalous, so it got a divorce. But they end up falling in love with each other, and it's quite the. It causes some ruffled feathers, that's for sure. And then as they're on their extended honeymoon in Egypt, they find kind of peace from the paparazzi of the time and some solace and some break in the craziness. And they decide they're going to hop on this amazing oceanic liner, basically, and take its first voyage across the ocean to come back home, and it ends up being the Titanic. So we know where it goes from there, but I wasn't sure about this, but I'm absolutely going to be reading more books by her. This one had me captivated from the very beginning. I loved Madeline. I loved the relationship they had. It was so great. I could not stop reading this book. So highly suggest that one as well. All right, next one I want to talk about is a little fun rom-com. So we have Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Abby is one of my absolute favorite authors, as you probably already know. This is part of her kind of companion series that she has that I think begins with Part of Your World. So this one takes place in Minnesota, right? Really downtown, not downtown, but Minneapolis area. So I'm fairly familiar with it, which was kind of fun. It felt familiar to me. We have our two main characters. They meet via a comment section on Reddit. They both seem to have this same curse. Whomever they end up dating, once that person and them break up, the next person those people go and date are the people that they get married to. And this has happened time and time again. And so they kind of figure if they date each other, and then when they break up, they'll find whomever they're meant to be with. So they're going to give it a try just for the summer and see what happens. And we all know in true Abby fashion, that's not going to be the end of it. So it was fantastic. It was hilarious. It was great. It was heart-wrenching. I just love that woman's brain. It's so great. Next one I want to talk about is more of a contemporary novel, Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I think I warned you guys that this was going to be on the list, and here it is. This one follows Tova, and she is kind of surviving her husband's death. He passed away recently. She begins working the night shift at the Sewell Bay Aquarium, mopping floors, tidying up. She's also still grieving the loss of her son. A number of years ago when he was 18, he vanished in a boat in the Puget Sound over 30 years ago. So definitely is familiar with grief and familiar with how to help herself through it. While working at this aquarium, she befriends a very interesting character, Marcellus, who is an octopus, and they form this very interesting friendship. And in Shelby Van Pelt's genius mind, she gives us Marcellus as a character. And so we get to know what he's thinking and what he's doing and what his plan is. And he hates being in this aquarium. He calls it he's basically held captive. And we see kind of him and his relationship, and then also Tova and what happens with her story. It's so sweet and so great, but it does deal with grief, so it can be very heavy at times, but I absolutely loved it and highly recommend this to anybody and everybody. And next one, another historical fiction, we have The Women by Kristen Hanna. I feel like this is also the Lindsey's favorite authors of all time list because she's also on that list. The Women follows Frankie, and Frankie is probably, if I had to pick a favorite character from this year, she is in the top 2 or 3. She is this super independent, determined woman. We are in the beginning of the Vietnam War, and her family has a long history of military service. And most recently, her brother was serving in Vietnam and lost his life there. And the family is just very heartbroken and just mourning this loss. So she decides she is going to sign up as a nurse and go and fight. Her father has a really big problem with this. Her mother is not my favorite character in the whole world. Let's just be honest about that. But she's determined to do it anyways. And so she joins the army, which is basically the only branch of government that will get her there quicker. And she goes to Vietnam and she experiences so much. But that's only half the book, because Kristen, in her wise ways, brings us back stateside for the second half of the book and the issues that any Vietnam vets returning to the United States faced at the time. And then on top of that, being a woman, being told women didn't fight in the war. It is a load of stuff, of hard stuff, but done so very well. Again, unputdownable, so eye-opening. It was absolutely amazing. I love the book so very much, if you couldn't tell. Okay, so then making sure I'm not losing my spot here. We're just gonna keep going on the historical fiction train and give you my other favorite character of the year. We have The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. So this takes place in the late 1700s. We follow Martha Ballard, who is based on a true character named Martha Ballard. She's a midwife living, I believe they're in Vermont, I want to say. And they live right along this river, and every year the river freezes, and at this specific point in time, it entombs a man in the ice. And so as things start melting, they find this body, and as the only midwife in town, she is kind of called as the doctor in town to kind of determine what cause of death was. She is then kind of questioned or challenged by a new local physician that just came into town, who basically goes against her conclusions. Martha says this man was murdered. This doctor says he was not. And so we go down this rabbit hole of a mystery, of a story of this man's past life and what he has done, not so great things. Was this something that was deserved? Was it not? How is it connected? What that might be. Martha is an unbelievable woman. She's also a midwife, so we follow a number of times where she is called to go do her job. This book, again, massively tabbed up. It was gorgeous. It was fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. I have borrowed it to a number of people. We've got it. It's very well loved because I keep shoving this in people's hands because it was so great. So highly recommend this one as well. All right, we're almost there. Another historical fiction. And kind of my theme with historical fictions this year has been to kind of read from different time periods I don't necessarily read from very much. We have Shakespearean time, we have late 1700s, we have the Vietnam War, and now we have the Cold War. So we have Our Woman in Moscow by Beatrice Williams. This was my first book by Beatrice Williams, and I can definitely see me reading more by her. She writes her characters in a way you cannot help but just fall in love with them. So this one takes place in the late 1940s, kind of at the beginning of the Cold War. We are full of espionage, family devotion, defecting from your country, I think is the word I was looking for. But we have Iris and we have Ruth. They are sisters, and they end up going to Italy to spend some time kind of away. And while there, Iris falls in love with a very charming man, ends up staying behind, and Ruth goes back home. They end up not being as close as they were as friends, and Ruth gets this very desperate message basically from Iris, who's now living in Moscow with her husband and children, and it's mainly a call for help. So as this is a Cold War espionage-esque book, you can only imagine the life Iris has been pulled into and the lengths that Ruth is going to go to help her sister, no matter what, because sisters are sisters forever. So highly recommend this. This was a surprise for me. I didn't know what to expect, and I absolutely fell in love with it. The last book I'm going to talk about is probably one on a number of people's favorites this year, if not last year. We have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I know, a fantasy book about dragons. Who would have ever thought? But it's taken the world by storm. Let's just be honest about that. We have Violet. She is supposed to enter the scribe quadrant and ends up being a dragon flyer, which she is a very fragile human being. Let's just be honest. Well, I'm sure you know that's not really the case. But she ends up being riding dragons and fighting for her country, her world, her whatever. And there's a lot of romance in this book I wasn't expecting, and I was absolutely here for. I didn't know I could love dragons as much as I did. There's a dragon that is such a curmudgeon in this book, but you can't help but absolutely love him. And Violet is just an amazing character. So I read Fourth Wing, absolutely sucked me right in. I then read Iron Flame, and I'm so excited for Onyx Storm to come out very soon. So those are my top 10 books that I read in 2024. It's a pretty decent list, very historical fiction heavy. Those definitely tend to make more of my top and favorite books of the the year for some reason. I think it's just because of the depth of the story that I tend to get out of it. But they're fantastic. I recommend every single one of them. What was your favorite? Do you have a little list? Do you have a couple? What made it to the top of your list of 2024? Leave them below because I'm always looking for good recommendations. Otherwise, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will see you next time. Bye.